The organic marketplace is often described as the Wild West. Though that descriptor is somewhat extreme, there is a little bit of truth to it. In organics, there's no Chicago Board of Trade, no hedging, no price discovery mechanisms, and significant, sometimes inexplicable variability. Marketing can be one of the great headaches for producers who are used to consistently delivering their crop just to the local elevator. But creative and tenacious organic producers do find ways to enhance their price premiums without undue marketing burdens. By raising food grade or value-added crops, or by finding local feed mills and flour mills that might pay a little bit more of an organic premium. In this lesson, we will discuss the ins and outs of marketing that organic field crop. Let's start by hearing from an actual grain marketer to get a good lay of the land and establish what the real differences are between organic and conventional field crop markets.
Hello, my name is Colin Weigman. I'm with SureSource, an organic grain company. I started back in 2014 working in the organic space as a grain buyer.
What are the differences between the organic and conventional markets?
Well, there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of similarities. Of course, you're working with a lot of the same grains and things like that. The marketplace is a little bit different, where in the conventional space, you have the Chicago Board of Trade, where all the pricing is based off of that for the most part. In the organic side, it's really dependent more on kind of just the supply and demand and what the marketplace will allow. There isn't a general or a central pricing mechanism for the growers to follow. It is really difficult to find pricing that's out there. So the best thing to do is just to stay in front of your buyers, know who's buying grain in your local area, and just kind of stay in front of them, see what their pricing is. There's email lists out there. There's some companies that'll have emails that they send out, or pricing online, things like that, but it's much harder to find. In the conventional space, elevators will post their daily prices. They have cash bids every day. You just have to, make the effort to make those calls, stay in front of everything, and just kind of follow what's going on.
And how are the supply chains similar or different?
The supply chain in the organic space differs quite a bit from the conventional space. Infrastructure in the conventional space is very well built out on the rail system. They've got a lot of elevators, a lot of different opportunities. In the conventional space, a lot of the grain stays pretty close to home for this, at least at the start of it. In the organic space, you do not have that infrastructure. It's getting better. It's growing. It's heading in the right direction. But it is a little bit more difficult to find your markets per se. Some places, some areas definitely have elevators that are local, which is great. But in the organic space, the grain can actually travel quite a bit just by truck. Sometimes grain will get picked up in the Midwest and delivered all the way out to, the East Coast in Pennsylvania, and then it all goes by truck. But being able to identify local markets in the supply chain is a very good start. You definitely want to familiarize yourself with that, but don't necessarily want to limit yourself to that either, because there are opportunities out there where a company will pay you a price at your farm, come and pick it up, and then they can take it where they need it to go. So keeping your option open in the supply chain is always a good idea.
And how should a farmer find those good organic markets?
There's a lot of conferences around the country that focus on organics. Being able to attend one of those, there's a lot of grain buyers that will be there. There's a lot of great resources out there as well. O-Grain is one of them that has lists of grain buyers. There's the Organic and Non-GMO report. That's a publication that goes out. On the flip side, once you are organic and certified, there's the USDA database that goes out, and the companies will sift through those lists, and there's definitely a good chance that grain buyers will reach out to you. And so in the conventional space, you're not going to be maybe getting those calls, but in the organic space, they're going to come find you. You may not want to wait for them to find you. So being active and going and finding buyers is definitely the first step. But there's a lot of ways to find those markets if you just pay attention and do your research.
So what are some best practices to keep in mind when marketing organic grain?
Yeah, so when you're working with a grain buyer, some of the best things to do, of course, is to stay in communication, and then also keeping the grain in condition, or at least once the grain's harvested, getting some test results on it, just so you know what you have in the bin, and also the grain buyer will know what they're buying. This helps alleviate issues with quality concerns at delivery, rejected loads. Nobody ever likes to deal with those. So knowing what you have, being able to communicate that is definitely a big help in the long run, just from start to finish. And so, and that just goes back to the communication. When you're working with a grain buyer, just communicate, even, throughout the year, during shipment, off shipment, just staying in constant contact of what you have going on is definitely very helpful for all the parties involved. One of the pieces of being able to market your grain is, if you don't have storage, potentially looking into that, because storage will give you a lot of flexibility as far as how and when you're able to market your grain. And grain buyers do like that flexibility. They'll typically pay a little bit more if you can store it for them, in essence. So being able to store your grain past harvest into the spring or summer may benefit you in the long run for a better price. Now, no guarantees year over year, but certainly an option. And that also gives you the flexibility to kind of play the markets, if you will. If you want to sell a little bit at harvest, get some cash flow, the price is okay with you, and then maybe hold on to some, see what the market's do in a few months. As long as you can keep the grain in condition, and you can certainly store it. I've seen some grain stored, wheat specifically, for a few years. I mean, it's certainly something that farmers will do to maximize their potential gains on their grain. So in the organic space, relationships go a long way, and you want to build those relationships from my perspective with the grower, and from the grower's perspective with the buyer. That helps you identify the markets, know what's going on, and organics started and still is a very, very large community. It's very farmer friendly. It's just a great feeling of community and family in the organic space. So you definitely want to make those relationships. You will make those relationships. There's a lot of good people in the organic space.
What do contracts in the organic space look like?
So in the organic space, there's a lot of different contracting options that you may come across. Different buyers are going to have different options for you. So one of the main ones is just going to be a straight and a bushel contract, where you have 5,000 bushels of organic corn. The buyer needs 5,000 bushels, so you contract the exact amount, and then that is what is expected on that type of contract. And those contracts happen throughout the year. They mostly are after harvest, once the bushels are in the bin, or if you're delivering at harvest, those type of things. Prior to harvest, there are typically acreage contracts, production contracts that can be available for certain grains from certain buyers. Those are more in tune of an educated guess, where the acres you're producing and the grain that you have on those acres, anticipating a certain yield and trying to guesstimate where that bushel amount's going to end up. And so those are a little bit more flexible for the most part. A lot of buyers will have contact with you over the summer to make sure the grain's growing. You can adjust the bushels as needed. Sometimes the contracts will include an act of God clause, which basically states that if anything were to happen that's out of anyone's control, like weather, drought, anything like that, that they can be forgiven or extended into the next year. There's a workaround there as far as being able to execute those types of contracts. You can also look at, contract to grow seed, where you can contract your grain to be bought as seed once it's harvested. And in some instances, there will be companies that want you to grow a certain variety or specific type of grain for their use. So you're actually going to be contracting prior to even buying your seed, and then they may even supply the seed for you. So depending on what you're looking to grow, the type of operation that you're running, what you're comfortable with, there's definitely a lot of marketing options out there for contracts. And I haven't even probably touched on all of them, but those are at least some of the main ones that you're going to run across. So, if you're growing a specialty grain, let's say like einkorn or gluten-free oats or something that's pretty specialty, doing a contract to grow or a contract ahead of time is usually a safer bet, just because after harvest, those grains may be a little harder to market, whereas organic corn and organic soybeans are a large marketplace in the organic space, and you would have an easier time selling those after harvest.
And what contract terms should I be aware of?
So a couple terms you may hear when you're talking about contracts are forward contracting and spot market contracting. So on forward contracting, that is more of a pre-harvest contract that you set up either before planting or after planting, but that contract will go into effect prior to harvest. And so getting a forward contract on your organic grain, which you can use towards your insurance, that will help you get an organic pricing on that insurance for you. So a lot of insurances will use kind of like a county average or something like that when they do the insurance. But if you have a contract at hand, which in this case would be a forward contract with a grain buyer, they'll actually be able to use that pricing on there to get you that better price if and when you may need that insurance claim. Yeah, so in the organic space, you have pricing on your contracts are typically priced FOB, which would be freight on buyer, meaning that the buyer picks it up at the farm, the title transfers to the buyer, and then the buyer is in charge of taking it to the next destination. So the buyer pays for the freight and everything, and you get your price at the farm. On the other side, you have a delivered price, where if you do have a local elevator or if you have your own trucks to deliver far away, you may be able to take advantage of, cheaper freight or something like that. But with that, a delivered price is going to be a price to the destination. So all the freight and everything, all those charges and everything involved is on the grower or on the farmer at that point.
What are the payment terms like in the organic market?
So one thing to keep in mind when you are working with a grain buyer is the turnaround for payment terms. Those vary from company to company. It's a very different type of situation than you may find at conventional elevators where they're local. They pay maybe same day, next day. Where in the organic space, that can take a little bit more time. 2 to 4 weeks usually is the range, maybe a little bit quicker for some companies depending on how they're set up. Just being mindful of that, depending on how your farm is set up and how you budget and your cash flow and things like that, it's just something to consider.
So it sounds like storage is more common in organics. What do shipment timeframes generally look like?
Another thing to look at while you're looking at contracting is the shipment time frame. Just knowing what your capabilities are and how you want to ship it, being mindful of the time frame. A lot of grain buyers, if there's a wide range of timings, they'll want it at buyer's call, meaning that the grain buyer will be the one to initiate the shipments or contact you when they need it. So if you need to ship all your grain in, say, April for whatever reason, but your contract is April, May, June, the buyer may not be able to take everything in April, even though you need to move it. So at the contracting time, you just want to be aware of your needs at your farm when you need things to be moved, and just make sure that there's no overlap or anything there that you can cause some struggles or anything like that.
So everyone keeps telling me that there's money in organics. What do prices generally look like?
So in general, organic prices are usually higher than the conventional prices, just given the practices that go into raising organics and the yield drag and things like that. There's usually a few dollar premium, maybe twice. It depends on food grade and feed grade. But there's definitely premiums built into the organic space. On occasion, those premiums may shrink. They may expand. There's definitely different opportunities, just given the structure of organic pricing. It can vary quite a bit.
Any last thoughts?
So getting into organics can certainly be challenging and maybe a little bit scary because there's a lot of unknowns possibly. It's not as set up maybe as a farmer may be used to in a conventional space. But the opportunities are growing endlessly, and it's a growing space. And once you get into it, get your toes wet, start learning it, it'll become easy. You get those relationships built, you start talking to more people, attending shows, meeting more farmers that are like you and doing similar things. You have a lot of good conversations, you learn a lot, and there's just a lot of potential. You never know until you try, but it's certainly something that is very exciting and has been growing year over year.
Organic marketing may still be a little on the Wild West side, but it's been slowly stabilizing and professionalizing, just as the whole industry has. In this predictably healthy market, organic growers will generally have more marketing power than conventional growers. They have buyers calling them. they can more easily sell into high-value, niche markets. And at the end of the day, they have a product that's frankly more in demand than their conventional counterpart. Yes, marketing organic grain is more work than driving down the road to the nearest elevator and taking the price that they give you. But just like the other parts of organic that are also more work, it's worth it. And you can take that to the bank.